It is getting very interesting in the North Atlantic, as we now have two disturbances at the moment here, with our new one at 60% and heading straight for Texas. The waters are becoming a lot more warmer here across the area, which is the reasoning for why 90L and 91L are becoming a lot more organized. We are looking at possibly for some impacts for the Texas area within the next 24 hours, including winds and as well possibly some significant flooding on the coastal areas. And as well, we can't forget about Bermuda possibly going to be seeing some very, very gusty winds. But without further ado, let's get into the forecast. So here's a look now at the 5-day graphical tropical weather outlook here for the North Atlantic, which came from the National Hurricane Center from Miami, Florida. And just looking at this, it looks completely different to yesterday. I mean, look at what we have. Another system and disturbance here in the North Atlantic. And this one's a little bit hitting closer to home, as it's going possibly directly for Texas. The good thing is, this should not become a tropical storm, or at least subtropical, like we're looking at for 90L, but this is so possibly going to become a tropical depression. It does have a 60% at the moment, so it feels like we're already in June, yet it's only May 21st here. So we just got this disturbance not too long ago, and right after we get a second one. So it seems as if we're getting flashbacks to the 2020 hurricane season, because we can get already two disturbances already and at least one name before June 1st. So really getting us flashbacks to 2020 hurricane season. But let's go ahead and start off with 90L, since that was our first disturbance of the year. And it is now at 90% for the next 48 hours and 90% for cyclone formation in as well the next 5 days. So we're starting to still see this non-tropical low pressure. So it is going to still looking at it's going to be still subtropical. It is now 300 miles northeast of Bermuda, and actually last exactly 24 hours ago it was 650 miles northeast of Bermuda. So it's getting a lot closer to the island here, and you kind of see that cone is basically directly north to Bermuda. So this may get a lot closer to the island than we expected. Because can it make a landfall? There is an increasing probability. It does not mean it's going to happen. However, the probability for it making a landfall or skidding the coast of Bermuda is increasing at the moment, as it has still obviously not formed, and still looking at it's going to go into the southwest motion. So it is going to look like it's going to be possibly developing here in a few hours, or the next few 24 hours, possibly some subtropical storm characteristics. But again, it is going to possibly bring in some impacts by Saturday night or Sunday, is when we have the more favorable forecast for this to become a system here, as it's going through a more hostile environment. So again, 90% for the next 48 hours. So definitely watching out possibly for our first storm. I still don't know if it's Anna or Anna. All I know is that obviously it's going to be our first storm. And then our new system here. So you're probably wondering, how was this not here yesterday? Yet it's already a 60%, not only for the next 5 days, but a 60% for the next 2 days. So that's the shocking part. I mean, this is definitely a shock for portions there of not only anywhere, but this is definitely a shock for portions of people who live on the east coast of Texas. So we are looking at a observation here from recent satellite that we're seeing a low pressure off into the western Gulf of Mexico in the warm waters that already has 30 to 35 miles an hour here in the center of that low pressure. So this does definitely have a threat possibly to become some type of system, whether it's a depression. Obviously now it's still an invest, but we're looking at for some flooding here. This does not have a great chance of becoming an actual tropical storm or subtropical storm, but it does have a 60% obviously for forming into a tropical depression. So we will still get the amount of depressions on the list added, but not storms on the list. So 60% for the next 48 hours. And actually, according to some global and computer models, this could make a landfall into eastern coast of Texas as early as the next 24 hours or so. So this could very well bring impacts very, very soon. So can it just become a tropical depression before a landfall? That's the question. I mean, we already have the winds. It's just got to be confirmed that it has the characteristics to actually become a tropical depression. But let's go ahead and get a look here at the atmospheric conditions and the area of these invests. So here's looking now at the current, or this is actually the SSTs as of May 19th, but still pretty current. So obviously we do have one invest basically right here in the very cold waters, and we have another invest right here in the very warm waters of the western Gulf of Mexico. They're not that warm, but compared to where 90L is, it's a lot warmer. So let's go ahead and start with 90L. So 90L, as you can tell, is not in a greatest environment. I mean, it's in the waters of anywhere from 20 degrees Celsius to 23 degrees Celsius at its warmest. It's going to go into a lot more favorable atmosphere, or yeah, it's going to go into a more favorable area or atmosphere as it gets closer to Bermuda later into the weekend. So it's going to get nearly 23 degree Celsius waters, which typically you would not see a storm form, even subtropical. But I mean, it is finding a way between the amount of moisture in the area and the amount of a little gap with all that wind shear. It is finding a way to form a subtropical low. And then, of course, in the waters there in the western Gulf of Mexico, we are seeing anywhere from 24 to possibly 26 degrees Celsius. So where this low pressure is right now, it's actually at 26 degrees Celsius, but as it does get closer to Texas, it's going to go through waters up to maybe 25 degrees Celsius. So it's still just under that margin that we expect tropical storms or tropical or low pressures to develop that are tropical. But obviously, this is not like it's going to have not only the water, but it's not going to have the time to form into a tropical system. I mean, this can make landfall within the next 24 hours or so. So it's definitely a surprise. People obviously in Texas, we're not expecting this. Obviously, typically you get days ahead of time. But obviously, this was definitely a shocker, and the 30 to 35 miles an hour winds are the things, or was the thing that got the National Hurricane Center interested in this. That's exactly why confidence is so high already. So really watching out for Texas, east coast of Texas, and as well watching out for Bermuda for impacts between these two invests. Let's go ahead and get a look now at the European wind shear here. So at the moment, the more favorable conditions is obviously going to be Invest 91L. It has warmer waters. The thing is, it does not have enough time. It's really getting close to Texas coast right now. So although it does have a lot less shear, nothing more than 30 knots really, but it as well has the really warm waters. But we are seeing very minimal amounts of shear here into portions of the western Gulf of Mexico. And as well, we're seeing a big gap of no shear where we have Invest 90L. So Invest 90L is now going currently through a very favorable atmosphere, at least for the next 15 hours, still very favorable. And it kind of, as this low pressure goes down, it seems as if it's kind of a force field or somewhat guard away from that shear, because as the storm goes more south and to the southwest, so does that shear. That shear kind of follows, or that gap of no shear kind of follows as it goes more to the south. So actually 90L as well has some really favorable conditions. Actually, in some spots, less than 10 knots of shear in some spots. And this next 24 hours, as we go later on, then that shear kind of kicks in. And that's going to be the reason. And not only as it goes through colder waters into the weekend, but it does go through a lot of shear. But it does have at least 36 hours of really very favorable conditions. And so that's the reasoning why the 90%, or why that did increase to 90%, because it is going through very favorable conditions, including shear and moisture. Although the waters are really, really cold, 20 to 21 degrees Celsius, possibly 22 degrees Celsius, it's still rather cold for a tropical system to develop. Obviously, this is subtropical, so it kind of, I guess, argues the point there, but still, even a subtropical storm, it's really not too common to see it form those cold waters. We actually have 19 degrees Celsius waters just to I believe, to the south of where this current low pressure is. But let's now go ahead and look at the visible satellite imagery and as well the models. Here's a look now at visible satellite imagery here for Invest 90L. And for those who saw my video yesterday, this thing looks a lot better. Obviously, it does not look good at all whatsoever. It looks absolutely trash. But it does look a lot better than yesterday. You can kind of see there's that spiraling counterclockwise spin there. There's that low pressure right in the center of that gap right here's where that current low pressure is. And you can just see all this vorticity. There's actually an impressive amount of vorticity within this low pressure. I mean, it's not only subtropical, but really it's still an invest. It has yet to be confirmed to be a tropical depression or a tropical storm, although it does have the winds to it. It just has no structure to actually make it a tropical system or really subtropical storm, whether it's a TD or TS. So there's the low pressure. You can kind of see even these storms right here, possibly the outer bands there. Those tropical thunderstorms that I was mentioning the National Hurricane Center website, those as well have a counterclockwise spin. So this actually has a lot more rotation, a lot more vorticity than it did have yesterday. we are seeing as well some really deep amount of convection right outside the low pressure. And even in these outer bands here, they actually have some areas of very deep convection. So definitely very, very interesting here what we have at the moment for 90L. So it is looking a lot better than yesterday, which could be part because it is going through a lot more favorable atmosphere than it was yesterday. Here's a look now at the 90L intensity guidance, and this is definitely a pretty big difference compared to yesterday. So this is at 45 knots, which is, I believe, is basically 50 miles an hour. A lot of the models are taking this to weaken gradually. Obviously, it does have still 36 hours of really favorable conditions, including shear. That's exactly why, I mean, it does weaken rapidly all the way up to possibly maybe 35, 40 knots, but you do see they kind of straighten out. Basically, they kind of go straight to the right. So showing although it does weaken, these this a day to possibly 2 days of very good amounts of opening with no shear is going to allow this for no. I mean, obviously it's in a weekend, but it is going to still have enough potential to stay at named status, or kind of just above tropical depression status. So a few models, around 4 or 5, maybe 6, are taking this to weaken completely within the next possibly 18 hours and staying and maybe even strengthening back up a little bit. So either way, we do have a lot of models still keeping this at a tropical system or subtropical system, but named, of course, a subtropical storm, still named for at least the next 3 days. So it's still going to be there's a potential to the storm here, although it's going to weaken. At least it's supposed to weaken. It's still going to be sticking around here for a little bit here for the northwestern Atlantic. However, we do have 1 or 2 models that get strengthening, actually getting very close to Category 1, actually, but that obviously will not happen. So do not follow the L gem. But this is what we have so far, the intensity guidance. Let's now go ahead and look at 91L on satellite imagery. So here's the latest look now at 91L on satellite imagery, and this as well is not looking that shabby. There, it's a low pressure. It's a little lopsided. Obviously, the western quadrants do tend to have a lot more structure in this system, and that's exactly why it's subtropical. This is all open, and that could be part of the shear ripping it apart in that portion, because there is a lot of shear that we saw not too long ago in the just to the east. And that could be part to the reason why this is not a tropical depression yet, because it still has really no structure, although it does have the winds. It's not the structure yet. The same thing goes for 90L. So we do have some really nice banding. However, there's really not that much vorticity. The strongest vorticity is obviously right where that low pressure is, but other than that, it's not looking too good at all. But again, it is very, very close to Texas, not too far off the coast. So we have to keep a close eye out on this, and it has to gain structure. So here's a look now at the 91L model intensity guidance, and there's really little confidence, actually basically no confidence at all, that this will become a subtropical storm. So we're not looking at this becoming letter B. So just not that it's going to keep up with 2020 much longer. But you do see we have 2 that are taking this to tropical storm gusts or tropical storm winds, some sustained winds. But a lot of these are just actually keeping it from. They actually haven't weakened at this point, so this may or may not actually become a tropical depression. It does depend. I mean, it's still gonna exist. It's still gonna keep the winds, at least for the next day or so. But it's gonna make landfall within the next 24 hours. So it does have reason to weaken that much. So basically, it's basically like this until it makes landfall. So it's still gonna be weakened before landfall. But it's just a matter of time whether they're going to confirm it before the landfall or not. So here's looking now at the GFS here, and this is what we have at the moment. So GFS is not too quite on this Texas system right now, but the European does tend to be, the European's quite on it at the moment. But here's a look at the GFS, so you can kind of look at the low pressure millibars here, because the European does not do that for us here on Weather Bell. But 1,005 millibars here for the next 6 hours, so it is expected to possibly weaken, because actually no, it's going to remain much the same, because this is currently at 1,005 millibars. But as it goes towards Bermuda, it is going to go through a little bit more of a favorable area and get down to 1,004 millibars within the next 21 hours. So this says 5 a.m. here on Saturday. And it's going to go straight to the northwest with this Bermuda high. It's going to drag that system to the east, so keeping it from making landfall. So Bermuda, you guys are definitely dodging quite a storm. And then, of course, we kind of have a little bit of a storm there on the GFS, but that's completely the wrong storm. But they do have something over there just outside the Bay of Campeche in the central Gulf of Mexico. But, I mean, that's definitely pretty interesting. And let's now go ahead and look at the European really quickly. Let's see if we can actually get the European. Actually, hold on. So here's looking at the 6 hours, and there is the European right there, showing that low pressure. So the European is actually showing this, but very, very weak, obviously. So the next 6 hours, and the next, let's see here, this is going to be looking next 7 hours, and then we go to the next 12 hours. It's still just off the coast of Texas and does not have a landfall until around the next 17 to 18 hours. But it's going to bring very little rain, as it does not have a large wingspan or much of an outer band like 90L does. But let's now go ahead and look at the actual impacts wind-wise here. This is looking at the 10-meter wind speed here in knots. So here is a look at 90L right here, and then you got 91L right there. So this is a European here. So we actually do have around, this is basically around 38 to possibly up to 40 knots, actually 40.5 knots here. So we're basically at 46 miles an hour right here on miles an hour for 90L. There, the strongest portion is kind of on that northern portion of the low pressure, which is exactly where we have that strong slope convection, which I pointed out in the beginning of the video. And then there we have here 91L with around 24 knots. So we're talking here just under 30 miles an hour, basically. As we now get with the next 9 hours, they're going to start seeing some impacts for the southern and Gulf coast there of Louisiana, getting some gusts of maybe 20 miles an hour or so. But it's going to be mainly lopsided to the east, to the northeastern quadrants where we're seeing the strongest winds. However, the north and just general western quadrants will have the most, I guess, organized portion. We're going to start getting those gusty winds there in Bermuda with the next 9 hours, getting already gusts of maybe under 30 miles an hour. And as we go later on here into the next 15 hours, expecting possibly nearly 35 miles an hour for Bermuda. But as you do see, very little impacts for both areas that we're watching out for. Let's go zoomed into Texas on the NAM 3 kilometer. This is looking at 10-meter wind speeds in miles an hour. So right now, we're getting up to around 20 to 30 miles an hour there on that outer portion there of the low pressure. As we go later on here into 6 p.m. Into 6 p.m. Central, I'm going to start getting up to 34, possibly even 35 miles an hour just outside the Gulf coast of Louisiana. But already starting to get some gusty winds here next few hours here across the east coast of Texas, getting nearly maybe 13, maybe 14 miles an hour. And as we can now get into tomorrow morning here around 4 a.m., that's when this is expected possibly to get very, very close to the coast. And I'm going to start seeing maybe 30 miles an hour on the east coast of Texas. But this really won't be a big mainland threat here for Texas as it goes more inland. And let's now go ahead and look at the amount of rain here for the next 52 hours. We're going to be seeing quite a ton of rain there, nearly around a half foot of rain on the Gulf Coast with some scattered areas of over 4 inches of rain there from this system. So possibly some flooding. Let's now go ahead and look at Bermuda here. So right now we're going to start expecting around 29 knots here. So we're actually, this is 29 miles an hour. As we now go later on here within the next this next 12 hours, we're going to see a big increase into the wind speed and getting nearly 31 miles an hour. And as we go into the 13 hours, and get nearly 30 miles an hour just outside of Bermuda, and then it should calm down once we get into tomorrow basically in the next 24 hours or so. So we're going to be seeing just the gustiest winds basically now, and then it should really calm down for Bermuda, and rainfall for the next 3 days is going to be less than 0.01 or 0.1 inches, so very little impact for Bermuda. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and see you guys later.